Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday, May 7th, 2017, and this is your fun fact of the day. There's a song that goes, Father Abraham had many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so are you, so let's just praise the Lord. How was that a song? It doesn't even rhyme. It's not even close to a rhyme. Well, Abraham is actually a very, incredibly, immensely, and indispensably important person in the Old Testament. This actually includes Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faith. He's significantly instrumental in all three of their foundations. He wasn't actually called Abraham from the start. Initially, he was just called Abram, A-B-R-A-M. He got Abraham from the Lord several chapters past where we first meet him in Genesis. He was married to a woman named Sarai. Could also pronounce it Sarah, spelled S-A-R-A-I. Her name would also get changed later on. She was barren, though. She was unable to bear children to him. When Abram was about 75 years old, God told him, leave this land you're currently living in. I will show you a new land to go live in, and there I will make a great nation out of you. Abram decided to take his nephew Lot, or Lot, depending who you are and pronounce it, L-O-T, because Lot's father had passed away. Chapter 12 of Genesis, Abram and his family and everybody traveling with him decided to go to Egypt because of a famine throughout the land. Took Sarai, his wife, said to her, you should say you're my sister, because if they say you're my wife, they'll see how desirable you are, they'll kill me and take you for their own wife. So if I'm just your brother, well, they know I'll fight harder to keep you? He doesn't actually explain why he says to her, say you're my sister, not my wife. But she goes for it anyway. Well, here's the thing. Pharaoh of Egypt at the time sees her, says, hey, beautiful woman, I'll take her anyway. But because Sarah was already a married woman and Abraham didn't try to stop Pharaoh from doing this, because actually back then the custom was whoever got a woman to Pharaoh as a wife, because he had more than one, received great provisions. They were actually given significant gifts to give a woman to Pharaoh to be a wife. So Abram was getting a little wealthy from this, while his wife was almost defiled with by another man who was not her husband at the same time. So God greatly afflicts Pharaoh and his household. Realizing something obviously went wrong here, Pharaoh calls to Abram and says, so what's going on, bro? Eventually it comes out, Sarah's not the sister, she's the wife. Pharaoh's like, why did you do this to me? Take your wife, take the things, get out of here. Lift the affliction from Pharaoh's household. Abram would actually pull this same stunt later in chapter 20 to a different king of a different land. It's like he didn't learn any better. Chapter 14 in Genesis, Abram and Sarah and Lot go to a land called Negeb. There was a large gathering of people and animals with Abram at this point, large enough they couldn't actually settle in the town, they had to settle a little ways away, and actually split off. Abram and his Lot, figuratively speaking, and his group took one area, and Lot and his group, or Lot, settled in a different area because there were just so many possessions between them, it didn't make sense to keep them all together. So there were a couple towns called Sodom and Gomorrah. Their towns were afflicted by some rulers of some different tribes or cities or nations that Abram helped defeat. So when Sodom and Gomorrah defeat their enemies with Abram's help, a king comes out named Melchizedek who greatly blesses Abraham. Melchizedek is actually the first person that I'm aware of in Genesis who's described as being a righteous man. Priest of the God Most High, as it were, was the specific phrasing, which is the first time this occurs. He's noted as the king of Salem, at this time thought to be the actual city of future Jerusalem, same city. In turn for this blessing, Abram gives a tenth of everything to Melchizedek, which actually becomes the standard for what we know as a tithe or an offering nowadays, literally 1/10. Chapter 15. After the battle, God comes to Abram once again, and this is where we have the actual famous, where God takes Abram outside, says, look up at the sky at night, look at the stars. If you can count the stars, that's how many offspring I will make descend from you. Here's the thing though, Abram knew Sarah was barren. They couldn't have any children. And yet, Abram believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. This is one of those ideas that actually becomes fundamental in the Christian faith, where when God tells you something, you believe it, regardless of whatever previously known restrictions or afflictions or obstacles that you are aware of. God is greater than anything that you know of. When God says it's going to happen, you believe him. Abram did, and he was more righteous for it. God actually let Abram in on a little bit of a secret, saying that in the future, a few hundred years down the road, his offspring would actually become slaves in a foreign land. Spoiler alert, this is Moses with the Egyptians and Israel being slaves to the Egyptians. But God also mentioned that he would rescue them himself and bring them to the promised land. Chapter 16, Sarah realizes, hey, God says Abram's going to have many offspring and through them will be a great nation. But I can't bear many children, so here, Abram, take my servant Hagar, sleep with her, have children through her, so that will become your great nation. It's a significant unbelief in what God had promised Abram, which to us, now this would seem to make, again, a bit of physical sense because we know Sarah can't have kids, so she has a servant who is given to Abram so that She can have children, Abram will have children, they will become descendants, therefore offspring, and they will grow and multiply. Here's the thing though, that's not what God promised. The covenant of marriage is already superseding this concept of literal descendancy. Long story short, Hagar has a child named Ishmael. At some point, Sarah tells Abram, hey, kick her and her boy out because I don't like the way they're talking about people. However, God, being the caring God that he is, does not leave Hagar and Ishmael to be destitute, forgotten, forsaken. They are cared for in their own way. You can read more about that beyond chapter 16. So this is the beginning of the man who would become one of the most known people in the entire Bible, behind probably Jesus and Moses and maybe a couple others. Abram's got to start fairly modestly. You read about all this that I just described through chapters 12 through 16 of Genesis. And he's not done yet. We'll revisit him next week. In other news, today is National Barrier Awareness Day, in recognition of the disabled and all the everyday obstacles that they face. Even just a stair or a pair of stairs or a whole set of stairs can be a significant problem for a lot of people in this world. It's not something to be taken lightly for everyone. And it's National Lemonade Day. It's probably warming up outside right now. I know it has been recently. Spring is in full swing, so sit under that tree and enjoy a decent breeze. Have a nice glass of lemonade if you can. Hope you've enjoyed this fun fact of the day. See you tomorrow.